According to the research at National Louis University, I think it's something like 70% of people who become child care directors go directly from the classroom into being directors. And most folk don't have management training. And so we used to have all these friends. We were like equal with all these teachers, and all of a sudden we become the person in charge, and the teachers want us to speak for them, and the people we report to want us to hold the line. It can be a real challenge, and I can really get caught in the middle if I try to maintain relationships in the same way I had them when I was in the position everybody else is in. So that's one problem. Another problem is a lot of times we work with family members. If I've got my sister-in-law and my cousin and Uncle Ernie working in my program, how can I treat them with respect, the same respect I'm treating other people with? Because people are watching. 65 to 90% of human emotion is communicated non-verbally. So people are watching and they're picking it up about whether I'm playing favorites, whether I'm treating someone differently than someone else. So here's what it takes. And this is not easy. What it takes for me is I have to have a sit-down, honest sit-down, probably off-site, maybe out having a cup of coffee, and I have to say, Luis, you and I work side by side, and I love you. I have great respect for you. We work together. Now I'm in a different situation, and I still love you, but I am now responsible professionally for being your boss. And so the relationship we had before can't be the same. I need to hold everybody to the same standard. And so the truth is, we can't maintain that same friendship that we had. At work, I'm the boss, you're the teacher. We can have respect for each other, but we cannot continue to have that kind of personal relationship that might appear to be favoritism, nor in my heart, this is the hardest thing, nor in my heart can I treat you specially. So that's very heart-aching, it's difficult, but you know what? I had a director in Dorchester, Massachusetts, who used to say to me, at the end of the day, I have to go home and live with myself. And as a leader, another director said to me, I have to be bigger. I have to be bigger. And so the best advice, I don't like to give advice, but I can tell you what's worked for me. What's worked for me is to just have an honest conversation with each person and say, personally, I love you. Professionally, I respect you. And when we're at work, I'm going to hold to that professional standard. And our friendship is going to be honored outside of here. But I'm going to honor everybody equally when it comes to being professional. And let's talk about how you feel about it. Let's have a grieving party, whatever we need to do, because things have changed. And you know what? It can be a change for the better, or it can be a change for the worse, but let's work on it together. This is what I'm going to do. How can you work this through? How can we work on this together so we transition? It's not easy, and it can be painful, and because we're communicating all the time, if I'm giving favoritism to that person, he's going to know it, she's going to know it, and it's going to cause a problem with the morale, and I don't want to go there.
One of the hard parts about early care environments is that they're often small and intimate, and in fact people do have relationships and people do become friends. And then when suddenly someone is thrust into the role of a supervisor, it can be difficult. And I think the first thing is that you have to have a culture of transparency where you acknowledge that this can be difficult, that we can't be friends. It's not unlike when spouses end up working together. The more you can talk about working together, the more likely it is that you'll succeed as a sort of a family business. So I think that the major advice is raise the issue before it happens and talk about how it's going to create changes. Hopefully there'll be a division between life outside of work and life inside of work. But if you pretend it's all going to be the same and it's all going to be hunky-dory and we'll both figure it out, it's not likely to work.
You know, I had several relationships before I became a supervisor, and they were important relationships, and it just creates it created a conflict that, we didn't know how to handle that change in the relationship, and I think that's the key thing is what happens to the relationships that we build, whether they're personal or professional. That's key. Is we have to see how we handle them, how we manage them in our own lives. It's really a struggle if you're looking to say, well, I'm the boss and I can't be your friend anymore, because people are going to think this way. That shouldn't change. It just means that, I have a new responsibility. I have to make sure that these things that we're saying that we're going to do are being done. That what I'm responsible for, it's happening. So that shouldn't impact on our personal relationship because of the fact that, I'm just doing what I have to do. These are meaningful relationships that you could make, or that you just go on and 8 hours a day you just go in and come out of your work, and that's not productive, because I think that the best environment is an environment to work. The best place to work for it is in an agency and where you could thrive in your environment as a person and as a professional.
It's really hard to have a personal friendship with a supervisee, so I like to keep the boundary lines clear. When we're at work or when we're dealing with work situations, there's issues of confidentiality, and when you become friends, that gets breached. So I'm an advocate of people that I supervise. We can spend time together, but it's not necessarily the same as when I'm spending time with my personal friends. So I don't think of supervisees as developing personal relationships. I can be supportive, they can be supportive. I can provide feedback, they can provide feedback. But because it's that supervisory position, it's very hard, I think, that's just a very difficult area for me. So I avoid, and had always been coached and counseled not to try to create personal relationships with people that I supervise directly.
It's very difficult when you have an employee who is also seen as a friend to an administrator. Whether or not the administrator actually handles that person any differently than anybody else that they handle on the staff, it's often perceived that that particular person is getting some kind of special deal, some kind of special favoritism. If you have the friendship and it's already in place, what you have to do is put things in place to make sure that you do everything possible to avoid the sense of favoritism. For example, if the person is your direct report and they are asking for time off, then that particular person may need to have their time off approved by someone else, and that may need to be known by others in the building. It's important to clearly communicate to everyone that you have set aside a separate policy, because people are going to know about the friendship if it exists. You can't pretend that it doesn't exist and that you're not going to address it. You must address it clearly, like in that regard.
I think it's very important, if you find yourself in the position where you are supervising one of your friends, that you establish very early that your relationship at work is a very different relationship from your relationship outside of work. Your friend needs to understand that there will be no special favors, that they will be governed by the same rules that everyone else is. If you are not able to maintain the difference between the two settings, then it may be a friendship that you need to back off from while you are supervising that person.
Boundaries are that's the most important word of wisdom that I can offer, or just don't have friendships within the staff. Be friendly, but don't have friendships within the staff if you can't establish clear boundaries. I see frequently, or I see occasionally anyway, programs where these boundaries have not been established, and it really harms, down the road, it harms what's going on in the management of the program.